Right. Good evening and welcome to Ealing Council's Scrutiny Panel, and this theme of the Scrutiny Panel is climate emergency. This is the third meeting and it's the final meeting of this civic year. My name's Councillor Paul Driscoll and I'm chairing the meeting this evening, and we have Councillor Gary Buttersill who's Vice Chair, and also in attendance we have Joe Maltinson who's the Climate Action Officer with Manager for Ealing, and Katrina Baker, and welcome Katrina to the meeting, who's the Director of Communities and Environmental Services at Groundwork London. So if we go through the preliminaries of the meeting, just let members of the public know that participants indicate by showing their hand on the Zoom function or in the chat box for discussions about the meeting. So the chat box is not for parallel discussion or parallel meeting, it's to help with the functioning of the meeting. So if there's any references to raising of hands or chat box, that's what that's referencing. So if we go with the order of the agenda, I only have one notice of apologies, and that's from Councillor Young to say that he's got a commitment with other council business this evening and has to leave early. So thank you for sending that in, Councillor Young. There's no other absences or substitutions, and I've had no notice of any urgent matters. And there's no issues to be considered in private at this meeting. I've not been alerted to any declarations of interest, so if there's any declarations of interest, they need to be made now. Right, getting no indications of declarations of interest. So if we go to the minutes of the last meeting, so are there any corrections or arising from that at first? Any corrections from that? I'm not hearing any or seeing any hands issuing corrections, so I'm taking it that there's no corrections. So, and can I move that we accept the minutes of the previous meeting if there's no corrections? I don't know if there's any matters arising. No matters arising. I'm having no indications there. So if we accept those as, oh, Councillor Martin.
Yeah.
Oh. I was getting some, I don't know if Councillor Martin or Councillor Mohan are just coming in, or is that just some background noise?
I just tagged
Oh, I think it might be Councillor Martin.
I was just saying agreed.
Oh, great. Thank you. Thank you. So the sound broke up there, Councillor Martin, just to let you know, but thank you. Thank you very much. So if we move on to the substantive business now. So we have a paper in front of it and it's about energy efficiency. So when we think of climate emergency, we often think of wind farms and solar power, but actually there's no mention of wind farms or solar power to a substantial extent in this. It's about being efficient with what we've got and sort of taking a step back from often what people's perceptions of climate emergency and how we address that in terms of energy, and looking at how we conserve and the energy we use and minimize the energy we're using. So that's the starting point here. We have Joe Maltinson, who's the council officer here, who's going to give a presentation from that. So we'll hear Joe's presentation, who will talk through the paper that members have had in advance. And then we've got Katrina, who will then come in with her PowerPoint that she's going to go through her work. And Groundwork have had quite a long-standing connection with Ealing, working for a number of years, doing energy efficiency work and liaising with residents there. So if I hand over to Joe, thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Driscoll, and thank you for having me here tonight, councillors. Always a pleasure to present on this topic to you. I'm going to just share my screen now. I prepared a few slides which just step us through essentially what is in the paper tonight. But as Councillor Driscoll said, I am the lead on climate action for the council, and as many of you will know, in January of this year, Cabinet adopted our climate and ecological emergency strategy. That strategy follows on from the declaration that you all made in April of 2019, which commits us to achieving a carbon neutral position for the borough by 2030. So our strategy is in support of that. And this is a slide, the next slide will be one that you're familiar with from the last presentation, but just a good reminder here of where carbon emissions are produced in Ealing. And tonight we're focusing pretty much on that golden slice of this pie, which is the domestic energy. We'll talk a little bit about the carbon emissions produced in the commercial sector as well, but our focus is very much on what we can do about helping our residents really improve the energy efficiency and energy performance of their homes. So this is just a reminder that our baseline comes from 2018, which is the most recent nationally available database that comes from central government. That's always produced sort of 2 years in arrears. And our baseline is 1.1 million tons annually of CO2 produced. So we've got a mountain to climb there. So as I said, it's domestic energy that we're focused on. There's two primary areas that we're going to be looking at tonight, and we looked at in the paper. One is through the new builds and what we're doing around policy for all of the new buildings coming through. And the second is recognizing that about 80% of the buildings that will exist in 2050 already exist. So the big piece of this is addressing the buildings that we see around us today. So this is just to talk a little bit about our own housing stock, which is to say that we own about, I think 12,000 homes are in our own sort of what we manage as tenants. So we have a pretty massive undertaking and responsibility in terms of control over how energy performance is for a number of our homes in the borough. And so we've been working closely, my team's been working closely with the housing asset management team to make sure that we adopt far-reaching policies and that we really integrate energy efficiency and improving particularly the fabric of homes, which by that I mean that the outside sort of the walls, the rooftops, the windows and doors, to make sure that we drive down what's called energy demand. So that's the requirement for energy in our homes. I also wanted to touch a little bit on a specific project, which you'll see in the paper, which is a deep retrofit program called Energiesprong. Energiesprong is, by the name you might recognize it not being an English name, it comes to us from the Netherlands, and it's a way of retrofitting homes very swiftly. So a full retrofit of a home can be done in, where the process is very quick. It's done in under a week, but we estimate that it'll take about 2 weeks for us to complete retrofits in our initial sort of prototyping and pilot phases. And we've got a program underway that's just been announced for the Village Park Estate, which is in South Ealing. So you'll start seeing, hopefully maybe you saw in around Ealing this past month, a little article on that talking about what we have planned there. And basically that wraps the whole home in the amazing insulation. It updates the heating system. It moves us away from a gas fired system towards an air source heat pump. So it moves us off from the gas grid and onto the electricity grid. That's beneficial because the electricity grid continues to decarbonize. Sorry if that's jargon, I'll try and take the jargon out of that, but we continue to reduce the carbon emissions that we produce as a result of producing electricity in this country at a very good rate. And so therefore moving us to a more electrical system reduces our carbon emissions as a whole. And so that's sort of the big sweeping trend that we're seeing across the nation is a move away from gas powered heating. And you'll hear that called decarbonization of heating. So we have, this says we have 15 pilot homes to be delivered in August on this slide. I think that in total, we have 40 homes that will receive that pilot project treatment by the end of the year. And then we have 24 flats that will, at the beginning of next year, that will also receive that Energiesprong treatment. And you also see in this photo here, that's actually an Energiesprong home behind us and in the photo, and there's also solar PV on the top. So solar is an important aspect of this, but getting it right in terms of reducing the demand for energy is really where our focus is. And then talking a little bit, we've touched a little bit on the technology, but we're also looking at the opportunity to look at ground source heat pumps in our own estate, which is using the natural warmth of the Earth's crust and drilling into the earth and bringing that warmth up and actually warming our homes with that. And these systems are becoming more and more common, even in very built up areas such as London. And so we're exploring those opportunities and have started to do some of the business case work for retrofitting some of our larger estates. And we also, in terms of our own stock, for all of our new stock, we've made a commitment to try to achieve what's called the Passive House Standard, which is an accreditation, which I think I've also referenced in the paper in great detail, to say it's similar to the Energiesprong model in that the intention is the same, that we really bring the demand for energy requirement way down so that really people are paying very little for their energy needs for their home, and what we do need can hopefully be provided by those solar panels on the top of the home wherever possible. So our own Broadway Living Group has committed to try and achieve that Passive House Standard for all of our homes that are being built through our massive home building program that we have coming through. And just moving on to the private sector in terms of our housing stock, we have, we have one major scheme going on right now. I was going to say two, but that was concluded a little bit early by government in March, so we no longer have that program. But what we do have left is called the Green Homes Grants Local Authority Delivery Scheme. So this targets our low income and poor energy performance homes. So homes are typically, let's see, they have an energy assessment. So an energy performance certificate, an EPC rating is given to homes after survey is completed, and that's on a A to G scale, A being the best performing and G being the worst, the draftiest, the coldest homes, the hardest to heat. And so we are targeting our residents in the borough and private sector accommodation who have low incomes and these really poor performing homes. So what's called the E, F, and G bands of that EPC scale. And as we move into summer, we're going to get a little bit of widening on our criteria. We're going to be able to include the homes that are in the D band as well, which is helpful, giving us access to help even more residents. Right now we have about £600,000 that's available to Ealing. We're working as part of a West London partnership. We actually are leading on that partnership, and we've been delivering on that program since I think we really kicked off as in going into homes and giving surveys the beginning of February, and we've already seen a few homes improved, and we have many more in the pipeline now. And we have to deliver that by the end of June for that first phase. Then we've got a phase 2 coming through, which I said would widen our criteria a little bit. And we'll have that funding. Right now that's scheduled to be with us until December of this year. And we're hoping that government continues to see the light of we need time to deliver these programs, and that these sort of fast-paced programs don't do anyone any favors. So we're really lobbying hard for more time to deliver so we can get to more households. And that phase 2 will bring about double the amount of money that we got in phase 1. So we'll be able to reach even more homes. The cap on that funding is up to £10,000 per home. So it doesn't get us to like a completely carbon neutral home position, because that would take a good amount more than that, but it moves us to the right position. It allows us to start to work on, as I said, those fabric measures that are really important, and especially in terms of affordability and addressing fuel poverty. We also have a connection in with our Healthy Homes Ealing program, which Katrina will talk about in a bit, I'm sure, because Groundwork runs that program for Ealing and has done for several years. And so all of our programs really do connect back to the Healthy Homes program, and that program is like a massive spider of referral networks out to all of the various services that we know that our residents that are often in vulnerable positions need help accessing. Um, This next piece just follows on with the paper talking about what we're doing on our corporate portfolio, building portfolio. So we've also secured almost £3 million in grant funding to retrofit our own buildings. So that's our offices, some of our park sites, our community centers, anything, basically any site that Ealing Council paid the utility bill on was available to us to bid for some funding. We were happy with the success of our bid, and now we've got a contractor in place who's going through and providing these proposals of what to do to really bring down the energy demand for the buildings, also look for opportunities for producing energy, renewable energy through solar PV. But again, we've been given a very tight timescale to deliver, so they're looking for that by the end of September as well. So my team is in a bit of a fast and furious pace right now, but we're lined up to deliver on this, and we're really excited about the possibilities. We've also got a school that has been part of that first round of funding. And so they're looking to, using that word again, decarbonize a heating system of one of our schools. So I think they're actually going to use, I believe that they're actually going to use an air source heat pump. So it's not using the warmth of the ground, but they're using the actual difference between of temperature from the air. So it's almost like reverse air conditioning, if you can think of it that way. And this is all proven technology and has been used for 20 to probably more than 20 years throughout Europe. So this is just new to the UK, but we're becoming fast adopters. And my final slide is, it's not my final slide, I have two more, but just thinking about how we're engaging with the private sector on commercial properties. It's a space that is challenging for us to work in with the council because they're commercial entities, but there is a role for us to play because, as you can see there, I've highlighted that a third of the carbon emissions produced in the borough do come from industry and commercial. So it's really important that we do something to encourage, influence these players to reduce their carbon emissions, or we aren't going to get to carbon neutral. So we're working with the Design Council and Local Government Association to design out an engagement program to help small businesses really consider what their carbon footprint is through both their premises, which would be the energy efficiency side, but also thinking even more deeply about their supply chain and how they operate, for instance, on a transportation level. So we should have some good findings coming through and a prototype or a pilot project coming out of that this summer. And we'll be looking to hopefully put sort of everything together as a package of offering by autumn of this year. And then finally, this is my last slide, and it's just really talking about how we're linking all of this together to do so many things in terms of health and well-being, but also looking really for the opportunities around the green economy. So it's a bit of a buzzword as well, but we are in this time where I hope all of you have seen our green print for recovery, which ties up the principles of climate action and neighborhoods and businesses and town centers as a huge, focal point, as a four-pronged focal point of our recovery from the last year that we've just been through. And there's a real opportunity for Ealing to embrace the jobs and skills that will come out of this new evolution of the economy. So there will be many jobs. That retrofit discussion that we were having earlier, like that mountain is enormous in terms of what needs to be done. That's thought to be a multi-decade approach that we will need to take, and so that will churn off thousands and thousands of jobs if we can get that right. And we could capture that locally if we work with our education, higher education opportunities to get the skills and training into our young people and really get them geared up to access this new economy that we're building. And there's loads more around the green economy, around nature conservation and mobility, but that's not the sort of focus of tonight. But the green economy is a multifaceted area, but construction and building technology is a huge piece of that. So that concludes my presentation. I hope I've stepped through the paper okay, and I'm happy to take discussion and And yeah, any comment from the councillors?
Thank you, Joe. Thank you. I think it really does bring home the pressing timescale or that the funding has, which must be an awful lot of pressure to complete a lot of the work in very short order, which is quite, that really brings it home. If I go to Katrina, and Katrina, if you can come to your presentation. So Katrina Baker is from Groundwork, and Katrina's worked with the council for over a number of years with several different projects, and with the Green Doctor project. Did I get the right term there? Yes, yeah.
That's right, yeah.
Yes. So if I hand over to Katrina, who's going to give her presentation, and then we'll open up for discussions and some questions. So thank you very much.
Okay, I'm going to hopefully share my screen. So let me. How's that? Is that working?
It is.
Brilliant. Perfect. So thanks for the introduction. I'm, as I say, I'm Katrina Baker I'm Director of Community and Environmental Services at Groundwork. So for just as a quick intro to Groundwork, Groundwork is an environmental and social regeneration charity. We have a vision to build stronger, cohesive and more resilient communities. And we do this in a number of ways. We have a mission to change places and change lives through creating better places, through improving people's prospects, and through greener living and working. And this is where most of our energy efficiency work lives. So the topic around climate change, I think for Groundwork, we're very, as an environmental charity, we've been considering how the work we do can respond locally to climate change, and particularly with local authorities in declaring climate emergencies and zero carbon targets being set. We've been considering how we can help in that aim. So the way we deliver our work, we very much focus on many people focus on buildings and infrastructure, but for Groundwork, our approach is very much at a systems level. We're thinking about the human impact and the changes we can make directly. And that means how we can affect people's lives, their daily lives, in their home, in their green spaces, in the things that they purchase, and in the daily choices we make every day. So, and if you see on the screen, you can see the kind of 6 areas that we focus our work around. And these are kind of the way we deliver our work on climate change. So one of the areas that is most effective, I suppose, particularly when it comes to energy efficiency and most impactful, is our Green Doctor programme, which we deliver on a number of boroughs across London. But in Ealing, this programme's called, as mentioned earlier, this programme's called Ealing Healthy Homes. And just if we go back to kind of our approach, it really focuses on a number of multiple areas: behaviour change, community awareness. It does focus on green jobs, but also has that kind of co-benefit and social value, where we're doing the referrals that we already talked about, the health and the fact linking with health and fire and social referrals. So just to kind of summarise what the Green Doctor programme is. Groundwork's Green Doctor programme helps households stay warm, stay well, save money on their household bills, and most important, also reduces carbon. Our aim is to support most people most in need, and the Ealing Healthy Homes programme is particularly targeted on people on low incomes, fuel poor households. In addition to being vulnerable, we focus on over 60s, families with children under 5, and people living with long-term health conditions or disabilities. Our Green Doctors are trained, qualified energy advisors, and they have the added benefit of being able to understand and communicate really well with local people. I've included a kind of process diagram on this slide, and it just shows the process of what a referral, what the kind of journey is for a Green Doctor visit. A Green Doctor visit starts from a referral and booking. We then normally would, in normal times, we would undertake a household visit, like in the photo, but since COVID, we've been actually doing phone-based visits and dropping off measures. We provide energy advice, we install measures, and then we create this kind of whole network of onward referrals to services in the community, from finance services to health services, and also for larger measures. We also then collect data, and that's really important because what very much, alongside what we're doing, we also want to measure the impact of what we do. And then we follow up with residents, particularly on the Ealing Healthy Homes programme. We've got a way of actually collecting data, following up with residents, and then having a look at the data from 12 months on. So really kind of looking at the longer term impact of the work we do. As mentioned, we've run, Green Doctor programmes in Ealing since actually it's about 2014. And currently the programme that we're delivering is focusing on 600 energy advice consultations between July 2020 and 2022, and already we've delivered half of these. The types of interventions that we do at a local level, we engage with residents, and we also focus then on measures that we can put into households, within the home setting. So the smaller measures, and all of these smaller measures actually make a huge impact on energy efficiency. Even the water saving measures, as standard water saving measures, help reduce the hot water used in a home, and very simply can help you save both fuel bills, but also have those kind of carbon targets reduction. We also, fit the usual kind of energy saving measures, everything from LED lights to draft excluders, etc. I just like to show a few slides of actually it's much easier to visualize what the Green Doctors do if you actually see the photos. So this photo actually just shows some of the Green Doctors in action, obviously in an environment where we're, pre-COVID, but it gives you a kind of flavour of what those visits look like, and so how the measures are being installed and the advice sessions. Just for a few stats, I thought I'd cover a few stats for the current programme. So since 2020, July 2020 to the end of March, we've already completed 324 energy advice calls. We've supplied over 500 energy saving packages of measures, as I said, including LED lights, radiator panels, power down devices, and that's saving 12,430 kilograms of CO2e. We've also directly applied for warm home discounts, assisted households with switching energy providers, and then also, as mentioned earlier, we also provide a support and check credit eligibility for the Green Homes Grants programme, which is obviously a really important grant programme to promote to residents that can help them install the wider and larger scale measures. Green Doctor thinking, we really try and work with the local authority to provide a holistic approach and trying to add value. So, where we can, we try and bring in investment around, free water saving measures, also thinking about how we can link to fuel vouchers, and also how we engage with communities. We are living, in a world that in London is very diverse, and of course Ealing is a very diverse borough with many languages spoken. So we thought about how do we engage and how do we ensure that our services are accessible to all. So very much around having free translations, and we've also during COVID we've actually developed a system where we can actually provide signed visits for people that are blind. And then on top of that, we're also thinking about how we capture the impact of our work. So we've developed a carbon capture calculator to measure the impact. We've also developed an app, and you can see that on the photo on the screen that it's an app to help visualize change. So one of the barriers to change is helping people or make people understand that behavior change is not just a something you do once you've just had a visit, but it's a long-term benefit, and helping people visualize, you know, the changes that they can make, and so they can choose how they can make a change in their life, has been really, really effective. And we feel that this approach is, although we're working primarily with, you know, many people that are vulnerable, we are looking at how we can adapt our services, particularly from a post-COVID environment, and how we could use the impacts of energy use and think about scoping an able to pay model. So very much looking at the wider borough residents. Just a few, you know, kind of what is the impact of a visit? So a typical visit yields about a reduction of about 0.8 tonnes of CO2e per year. And then obviously the other bonus, which is incredibly important, it helps, an average visit will bring a household out of fuel poverty. And then I just thought I'm not going to go through all of these stats, but I'm just going to leave them on screen just to show the impact at scale. So when you deliver, you know, that's obviously a multiplier, and this is, you know, so these are the programme we delivered in 2021 across all of our London boroughs where we've been working. And you can see the scale of how those measures and the CO2 really increases when you deliver at scale. I'm just going to touch very quickly on some other programs that are slightly that are similar, but that also do have a really kind of local benefit, and that's the smart. We do a program with Thames Water, and there's 3 areas we focus. It's about from the smart metering program. So we do smart home visits, which include helping prevent leaks and helping fix leaks at a local level. And then the smarter business visits, which is actually about addressing water saving and the impacts within business environments, but also with schools. And that's been a really kind of interesting development. So, and the amount of water saving you can make in those settings, I think, is incredibly important. But I'm not going to go into talk about any more of that today, obviously, because our real focus is around residents. The final thing I really wanted to touch on before I kind of just present a few additional things that might be relevant for the conversation. I just wanted to mention the Life Plus programme. So Groundwork was involved in a European funded programme, which was focused on place-based intervention, and why it was interesting, I think, from this perspective, is that it worked in Hampton Fulham, and it was focusing on climate-proofing social landscapes and mitigating climate change, but doing it on a place-based approach. So looking at how you can layer up different interventions in a retrofit environment. And I just thought I'd mention it because, as well as working on thinking about installing green roofs and SUDs in social housing environment to help with kind of cooling. There was also a way of showcasing best practice, building community, building understanding, creating green jobs, but also integrated that was behaviour change. So as well as doing all of the retrofitting, we were adding kind of behaviour change and green doctor visits as a collaborative approach. So, you know, just one of the things that I think we've really learned of what's really successful is where all of the services work and are integrated. And that's one of the motives of the Green Roofs from that programme. And I'm happy to share the link to the case study around that, because there's some really interesting learning about the way we engage with the community, if that would be useful. I'm mindful that I'm very much on probably coming to the end of my time. But I have left a few slides, which I'm just going to flip through. I'm not going to talk through, just so that you can see some of the other things you can think about around climate change. So, as I said, we do work with around green jobs, reuse, rework. So, you know, looking at how you repurpose white goods, something that's also been part of our Green Doctor visits during COVID, and then taking social action. Food waste and air quality. And that's me. Thank you.
Katrina, thank you very much. Thank you. I mean, I think it brings together quite a lot of themes there, and I appreciate highlighting how the Green Doctors are bringing a lot of often connected but wide-ranging things together with fuel poverty and environment, and it's you know, it's a very well established program, so it's great to hear some more details about it then. So thank you very much. If I open up to the panel now, so if we've got any questions or comments or queries, and see how we can get the discussion going. Just to highlight to the panel that this meeting also is looking at the recommendations, because it's the last meeting of the set. So so just about 20 to 8 now. So we've got the discussion, and then we'll have to think about recommendations for the whole set of issues that we've had in the last 3 meetings as well. So over to the panel if there's any indications or hands up for questions or comments. And if there's no hands up, I'll step forward. Oh, Councillor Martin, thank you very much. Councillor Martin.
Hi. Can you hear me this time, Paul?
Yep.
Okay, it's just a quick question to Joe. So in your written report, you talk about new builds and zero carbon, and you talk about the fact they often avoid doing so by paying the levy. I just wondered, do we have any influence over the levy, or has that already been fixed by government or something? Because it's something we could do possibly if we have got influence on it.
Are you happy for me to respond?
Yeah. Yes,
Yeah.
please. Yeah.
So yes, the answer is yes, we have influence. So in the policy from the Greater London Authority, the GLA, on carbon offsetting, they establish a price that they had tested for working across all of London. There's been a big debate about that value. It started actually at £60 per tonne of carbon over 30 years. And with the adoption of the new London plan this year, it's gone up to £95 per tonne. So it's going in the right direction, but we actually worked with 4 other local authorities across London and had our own study done, because that's how you can set your own price. So we had a study done which indicated that we are far below that by in terms of the value that's needed to offset that price. So they are recommending a tiered approach to carbon pricing. So for instance, if you can save 60% of energy on site, then you pay one price, and then if you exceed that, then the price sort of goes down, recognizing that you've done better and better. So that's something that the study has provided this recommendation for. And the idea is that why I've chosen 60% as an example is that the idea that's accepted across the sort of technical industry is that most homes on a a multi-home scale should be able to achieve a 60% energy reduction on site just through the way that you design a building. So that should actually be our minimum threshold. And so there's lots of sort of mechanisms at play. There's building regulations here, and there's of course developer pushback and the sort of the pitting against affordable housing and all kinds of conversations that need to come in. But we're really gathering an evidence base to help us increase that price. The indicative price that is put forward by that strategy, and I believe is going to be is being consulted on by Merton right now, is £300 per tonne. So the reason at that level is because if we are to install solar panels, it would cost us about the equivalent of £300 per tonne to actually do those projects, to conduct those projects. So saying if the local authority is required to save a ton of carbon with that allocation, then we need to be able to actually do that project. So it's going to be a big conversation with our development community, with obviously the Planning Commission, but we've got a lot of support to say that we do need to go further. No, whether it ends up being at that level or not, we do need to go a lot further and use that tool to help us really make the reductions. And it's not that we want to build that fund. We actually want the developers to make the good decisions about design.
Yeah. Thank you.
Joe, could I ask you, because there's work being on, there's some studies that are going ahead with that carbon offsetter. So is there a timescale when this 95%, well, £95 per tonne might get reviewed to a different figure? Is there some timetable for that?
Yeah, so we've sort of committed internally that by the end of the year that we would write supplementary planning guidance, which would allow us, so it's not a policy change, it's literally just the SPG that sets the price. The policy is already in the London plan to say that we need 0 carbon homes. So it's about the offset price that is determined locally. So we've, like I said, we have plans to write that SPG and get it adopted by the end of the year. Of course, that's a little more complicated with a small planning policy team and a new local plan being out for consultation this autumn as well. So it's challenging, but I think everyone has that intention that the faster we do this, the better it is for development. We stop filling that pipeline of new buildings that will eventually need to be retrofit.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, the end of the year is a near horizon. You know, so I mean, that's kind of encouraging that it is moving at a pace.
Yeah.
So we're hoping it actually follows that time scale, you know, so that's very challenging, but good to see that there's an intent to move quickly. So thank you for that. Thank you. So thank you, Dee, for bringing that issue up. Thank you. So if there's any other hands up or comments in the chat, then feel free. I mean, one thing that came up in the presentation is like doing retrofits and homes. They may not be necessarily invasive, but obviously it's a very personal discussion, and green doctors as well, like going into homes, you're asking people to think about changing what they do and how they do it. And I'm just interested for engaging with people's and getting people's response, because we're going in there with a good intention, but how is that received? Because you're asking people with green doctors often to change their way of living to some degree. And you're changing somebody's physical home with good intention for the energy sprung, but you know, it's a big ask of people to step forward and commit to a big change. So it'd be interesting from Katrina to understand that, how that connection's made with individuals, and also for the retrofitting for home, how that people get to commit to that, and how they engage, and what the discussion's like. It'd be interesting to understand that.
And I suppose from our visit perspective, every visit is different, and you know, we do our green doctors are trained in energy efficiency, but they're also equally trained in engaging with communities, understanding how to present information in a clear and an open way, not using jargon, trying to visualize it, trying to make it them understand their lives and how they can benefit, and also the steps that they can take. If someone's, you know, we have had cases where, you know, we visit an elderly person who's, you know, living in one room, you know, with an electric heater and not really even utilizing the basic functions of their home. And so it is about a journey, you know, and how we take people on those journeys. So, you know, so it is about understanding where people are and how much they will be able to cope with within that one visit. Some visits take, you know, a couple of hours working with an individual, whereas another visit might take, you know, much shorter time, and people might be much more ready to take on the kind of wider kind of interventions and measures. But we do fit the measures, so that's, you know, a real positive. We do, you know, we help them, we support them, we install them in their homes in normal times, and I think that's builds their trust and confidence in us. They feel that they are in a trusted space rather than, you know, they're being sold something. You know, we're not selling something, we're actually, you know, there to listen to them, there to hear what their stories are and how we can help. So I think it's very much that kind of balance between the behaviour change, the support, and also the, you know, technical knowledge.
Thank you. And Joe, in terms of the connection with residents, how's that come about, and what's the feedback from residents in terms of this process?
Yeah, so we are at the start of the energy sprung model for sure, and so we're just going out to residents now to engage with them on how we approach this. The sort of beauty of the energy sprung model is that it should just be a 2-week process where there's a bit of disruption, but they should never have to leave their home, which is a real benefit to the model. And I think following on from what Katrina said about the effectiveness of their home visits and building that trust, I think they're also able to sculpt a conversation around all of the additional benefits that come from energy efficiency installations. So we can talk about how much more comfortable their home will be. Like, you know, removing drafts from a home is wonderful. Immediately, it just makes you feel warmer, whether or not the temperature goes up very much or not. You feel a lot more comfortable. Talking about the health benefits, we've had a really good focus, especially with Healthy Homes Ealing, on the health aspect and trying to make sure that we're doing our best to install energy efficiency measures or get that help to people where they have respiratory issues, for instance, or you know, other vulnerabilities that make them really vulnerable to cold weather. So that the comfort and the health side is really big. The private sector, we can talk a lot more about building value into your home. So these retrofits, you know, we're not seeing it through just yet on sort of the retrofit side, but we do hear discussions about sort of the green premium for properties, like homes that are, you know, of a higher energy efficiency standard are sort of being valued at a higher rate, which, you know, could incentivize private homeowners to make those changes. Yeah, I think that it's about like this, that's the whole story. It's not just about energy. And also I think tying that moment where people are deciding to maybe, you know, get a new kitchen or whatever, you know, tying it, that disruption, to ideas around energy efficiency and putting that all together for people will hopefully make sense for them as well. They're already sort of on board for a bit of disruption or, you know, a big change in their home anyway. So why not sort of take it a step further and do sort of the right thing with their activities.
Thank you for that. So I've got Councillor Chohan, then Councillor Martin, then Councillor Mohan. So I don't know if maybe we might take a couple of questions together, perhaps. So if we have Councillor Chohan and then Councillor Martin, that might just help with some sort of flow of discussion. So over to Councillor Chohan. Thank you.
Thank you for the presentation, Katrina. It's very interesting. I just have a follow-up question on the issue of engagement. I don't know if I'm sort of misunderstanding, but what will be our sort of direct means of introducing those questions, I guess, as Joe was talking about, when somebody comes in and decides they're going to change their kitchen, how do we open those channels of communication with people to think, okay, well, at this point, we think about energy efficiency. Are we thinking of sort of platforming green energy providers as well in the council? How are we sort of working with those for homes that are not, you know, for homes that are not controlled by the council, let's say, or not council homes or not new builds? How are we looking to encourage changes there? And I was particularly interested in, and sorry if that was something that's answered before, I've had very bad internet connection over the few days, so I'm trying my best to follow the thread here. But the other question is about the green economy aspect. What's our plan internally in the council to move towards that, and what can we learn from organisations like Green Doctor in the way that they're engaging, you know, working towards creating more green jobs? I know you mentioned something in your presentation, Joe, about that, but I wonder if you could expand on that. You know, what's our remit to encourage other businesses to introduce more green jobs, for instance, and yeah, just a bit more about how we can facilitate that process, I guess. Thank you.
So should I start?
Fine, fire away.
I was just going to say, so around engagement and the way, you know, questions are framed, I think it's really important. I presented a kind of the visual of the app, of how we kind of talk about some of the smaller measures and how you visualize that. I think what you're really trying to do is help the audience kind of visualize the change that they're going to make. So you're selling, they're going to, with a small s, the benefits. So you're selling the, what it's going to be like at the end, and that really helps the narrative. It helps us, if you can visualize that your home's going to be a much better place, then that really is the buy-in. And then we're then on a journey to help them make that as easy as possible. So we can provide that advice, which is much it's much harder to do that on your own. So I think that, again, that trusted relationship and that visualizing what the result of the intervention is the way that we deal with that. And we do have, we do ask lots of questions, but in a way that is very much a part of a natural space, and a natural engagement, as much as possible. I don't know if you wanted to add any more to that, Jo.
On a slightly different note of engagement, one of the projects that's in our pipeline as a West London group that's working on retrofitting, like a retrofit action plan for the subregion, is to make sure that we develop some simple, trusted worksheets or advice sheets for our audience. So for our residents, for our head teachers, for small businesses, and we make that information robust and widely available, and also, like I said, replicated across the 7 West London authorities in the West London Alliance. So that's part of our commitment, because we don't do a good job of that now. Right now on our website, we do have a bit of information about what you can do with your home, but I'd be surprised if any of us can find that. Also, there's a new platform that some of you will be aware of, which is called Act for Ealing, which is a climate action hub. And so we just launched that with the community. So the council is sort of part of that Act for Ealing hub, and we're there with community organizations who are working on all kinds of climate action. And what we want to do with that as well is to develop these trusted pieces of information about all kinds of climate action, and energy efficiency and retrofitting will absolutely be a part of that.
And Councillor Chan mentioned about a green economy, so I'm just thinking about how we promote that and how we make it a reality.
Yes. So she mentioned a couple of things about platforming green energy providers, and I don't know if you meant like the green energy suppliers. We have a couple of sort of energy switching, which Groundwork also helps us out with, to make sure that all of our residents are offered the opportunity to switch their energy supplier. We have the Big London Energy Switch, which is a London-wide auction on changing your energy supplier. And the idea, it's a collective system of purchasing energy, so we secure a better deal, and all of that electricity that's purchased through the Big London Energy Switch is now a green tariff. So that's I don't know if you meant green energy supplier in that way, or if perhaps you were talking about maybe specialists in the retrofit area that are trusted resources on how to go about retrofitting your home. And in the report, in the section 1.22, when I have that table, the last box on there talks about a program called EcoFurb, which is really targeting the private domestic sector. So it's a model of sort of hand-holding householders through the decision-making process, and also making sure that you get good quality works, and that it's complicated. I think I've heard Councillor Driscoll talk about his own retrofit journey, and there are a lot of choices to be made, and if you're not technical, it is really challenging. So we're very well aware that we need to be linking up relationships with these specialist providers and our own sources of information to help give people that trusted info. And finally, with the green economy piece, the answer to that is we need to be doing a lot more. And with the green print and the recovery efforts that are underway now, there's a lot of text that's been written about the green economy and how we're going to pull that together. But I think it's really time to put action to those words. And we're trying to do that through the Green Homes Grant that we're distributing right now, the program that I mentioned that's also we're coordinating for West London. So as part of our social value aspect of that contract, we're linking that provider. They're called Everwarm, so they're a retrofit specialist, and we're linking them in with West London College, who are hopefully organizing a second retrofit academy for their college students. They did the first round of that in the autumn, so they were upskilling or teaching young people how to install external wall insulation and give them those skills, because external wall insulation is thought to be one of the technologies that we're going to see a huge amount of as part of this solution. So we're just now in early conversations to think about what technologies we're likely to see through and what that retrofit academy needs to focus on. But that's only, that's a very small cohort start of things, and we really need to start thinking about how we're going to go even bigger with this green economy thing and really capture opportunity for all of those that are now without jobs, especially as a result of the impacts to the airport, and sort of reskilling them and getting them back into employment within the new economy. But that is largely, I would say, ideas and we need partnerships for how to move that to action. So there's probably a lot to learn from groundwork and what you've been able to do there.
Yeah, just on that, we've even just simply in our Green Doctor program, and also linking to the work that we do with Thames Water, we are able to really try and look at ways that we can train up and build the skills. So because the skill set that we need for a Green Doctor is more than an energy efficiency qualification, we need to, that because we're working with very, sometimes very vulnerable communities or very vulnerable individuals. And so there's a real kind of like on the job learning that we need to do. So, and we don't always find that we have everyone with all of those skills. So we're often taking people that have had community experience and then helping them through the energy efficiency qualifications, helping them to support that, helping them starting off with calls and going on the journey, so we can actually build them into the environmental side. So, we're getting people to think about the career path, and that's our responsibility as well as an organisation. I showed also we've got another programme in Ealing that's focused on gardening and providing kind of garden grounds maintenance, and that very much is a trainee programme. It's about having a supervisor, having trainees, taking them through employment programs and on the job training, and enabling them to become the new range of grounds maintenance people with understanding lots of things like SUDS and other kind of aspects. So very much I think it's embedded in what we're trying to do, but what we're also trying to do is showcase more and think about other ways we can do that and work in with partners to enable that to happen.
Thank you. And we've got Councillor Martin, then Councillor Mohan afterwards. So Councillor Martin.
Hi. I wanted to ask about the retrofitting of council homes, and because it looks, according to your paper, to be really a win-win situation in that not only do we reduce carbon emissions, but we sort of potentially make life more affordable for some of our poorest residents. So who pays for that? Who pays for the retrofitting? And have we got targets? Have we got plans to try and achieve all council homes to be retrofitted by a particular? That's it.
And I think it would be helpful to also think about the timescale, because some of the energy strong is very challenging, this sort of first round, and I'd be curious to know what is the future funding, because this funding has got to be completed very well, immediately, it's so close. What happens next? Does it just fall off a cliff edge and come back? Where are we going after that?
Yeah.
So over to you, Joe. Thank you.
Pulling up a cheat sheet here. Believe it or not, the full strategy and all of our targets don't sort of stick in my head like I would like them to. But okay, so just to start with the first piece of your question is, well, your statement about all of the benefits of retrofitting. Absolutely, like yeah, there's I might have actually referenced it in this paper at the bottom. Hold on, let me just have a quick little scroll through. Yeah, so there's a paper, it's the sort of second from the bottom in the background paper is called Touching the Voids.
Oh.
A little bit dated. I mean, it's 5 years old. That's not that dated, but the outcomes of that, like the findings of that paper really tell us as a social housing provider what the multitude of benefits are. So there is absolutely, you're right, benefits around health and comfort and a financial benefit, helping with, people who, an audience who are likely to be fuel poor or facing sort of poverty issues of struggling to choose between, heating their home or feeding their family, for instance. But there's also a benefit back to us as a housing provider, in that they're seeing a linkage or a correlation between when you give people an improved home, which is energy efficient, we're seeing positive impacts on arrears. So there's less people finding themselves in arrears. So that's helpful to our own cash flows. We're seeing people stay in homes longer. So we're not, putting stress on that system of people moving around. So there are a lot of sort of ancillary benefits or, co-benefits to upgrading homes. The cost of it does come back to the council, or where there are public funds available, then we seek to use those, of course, or to supplement those. So there have been a few funds that have been made available this past year, along with that whole tranche of other funding that I was saying. So one of those is called the Social Housing Decarbonization Fund, and we were successful in getting funding for that to help with our Energy Sprong project. So I think we received about £2 million to help with that project, which is really like a good start. But that's just the tip of it. Like with that, we'll now be able to do 60 homes basically. And that is a part funding model. So ultimately, we do need a mix of investment and council investment that will come through. And this is an issue that's being looked at on a London-wide level. So I was just in a task and finish group this morning on London-wide retrofit, and they're doing a really deep dive into the data of how big is this task on a London-wide side. And the answer is it's an enormous task to get to zero carbon. Even if we set an interim target of just getting to like a good level of home performance, it's still an enormous task. That's why I said that it's a multi-decade project for us. And the way that we are encouraging and hoping and housing asset management is accepting is that it needs to be woven into their service delivery model, so that when they are doing their planned maintenance, so things that we know we need to do, that they're selecting materials that acknowledge our climate commitments. So if we're going out and putting windows and doors in, that we're selecting those that have really good energy performance, and we're not putting in just the least expensive thing that we can find. And not to say that that was ever our process, but making sure that this is one of the lenses that we're looking at all of our specifications through. So that's part of what's in the climate strategy, is a commitment that all of our specifications for the housing team do start to contribute to our climate commitments, I think from this year, if I can recall that correctly. But we also need to really start to innovate around, big retrofit projects, and there housing associations across London and across the nation really are grappling with this, like how to pay for it. And there are some models, including Energy Sprong, that are innovating around how we pay for that, and also addressing issues of equalities with that. So with the Energiesprong model, there's what comes along with it is also called a comfort plan. And not to throw us too deeply into the finances of this, but basically if we've taken your home, and let's say that it costs £1,000 for you to provide the energy to your home in a year, and by doing the Energiesprong model, it will probably cost you £200 per year. So now you're benefiting £800, and so we would, for a certain period of time, take a portion of that savings back as either a green rent or a comfort plan to help us pay for that capital. And also it helps because if your neighbor didn't have the same retrofit done to their home, it's a hard message for the council to say, well, this person only pays 200 and you still pay 1,000. So it helps bring that equity until we can sort of make some big progress on this. It brings some equity to that as well.
Okay.
I hope that helps sort of answer, but it's going to cost a lot of money. It's also going to create a lot of jobs. So we can look at it through that lens as well.
And when you were talking about the specifications for materials, Councillor Chohan's just added in the chat about the sourcing of materials. Do we have any criteria in terms of where we source, how local they're going to be? Because we don't want to just have materials transported across the world. But is there any consideration about that sourcing and carbon heavy source materials in either their manufacture or their transportation? I don't know.
We are doing some work around consumed emissions or embodied emissions. So that I think that's what you're referring to. So like all of the carbon emissions that are resultant from the mining and transportation and packaging, all of that kind of stuff. So we're doing some work on that on a West London level again, and putting together a procurement toolkit to help with our procurement processes. But it's a pretty tricky area. And I mean, especially when you're met with budget constraints. And it's not to say that what Councillor Chohan is saying is not the right thing to do. It is the right thing to do. It's just, it has to be, I think it has to be weighed up and sort of as part of a big range of criteria. So I would say we're at the start of that particular journey. And but I think we do have some good examples of, for instance, several years ago, like solar panels that were manufactured in certain areas of the world were not performing well, or didn't have the fire safety standards that we would have expected. So, there have been some hard lessons learned, not necessarily by Ealing, but other authorities. So we do have a range of criteria that help us select the best materials, but I wouldn't say it's always based on where it's manufactured.
Sure. And that procurement criteria will go across to Broadway Living as well. So it's the full span of the council.
It'll be the full span of the council. So like everything from stationery to, everything that we do. So the concepts will be applied to all, large value contracts or maybe all contracts. We have a lot of discussions to have with our procurement team on this one.
Thank you. And Katrina, you wanted to come in here as well. Thank you.
Yeah, I just wanted to come in particularly around, you were talking about using cost savings to help kind of not fund, but help to kind of proportionalise the cost. One thing to think about, particularly when new measures are installed, particularly larger measures, whether they're windows, boilers, all of those elements, is to ensure that there's really good guidance and again around for residents to know how to use those new things. Because what we found, particularly on new builds, that actually people living in new build, theoretically they're in, they should be in a space where the bills are lower, etc. But people don't necessarily do the right things, and they keep the heating up, open the windows. That they just do the wrong things. Often people don't know how to use their thermostat. There are many things that are actually that we need to think about. That isn't, the installation is only part of the solution. We also need to make sure that people know how to use the new interventions.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think that's very true. If like air source heat pumps are being used and how that is used, it's a different way probably from thinking about how we use a gas boiler, which everybody's grown up with. And so how do we apply that energy, and what do we expect from it as well? So I think making sure that what is installed, people understand why it's there, how it's used, how it's done efficiency is really crucial to that.
Yeah, that kind of guidance is really important.
Yeah, thank you. And I've got Councillor Mohan who wanted to ask some questions to Katrina. So Councillor Mohan. Oh, you might be muted, Councillor.
Yeah, you can hear me now, I think.
Yes. Yeah.
Thank you, Chair. My questions are quite simple and basic. I think having heard what Katrina has said about the work of Green Doctors, I think they are doing a very useful work. One is that how do we publicize? How are you publicizing their work? Do enough people around in the community know about their role and about what they offer? And the other question is that is their consultation free to people, or if there is a charge? And the other question is that what is the success rate of the advice, kind of in general? How many people take on board the advice they give? And finally, the grants you mentioned, are they primarily means tested? Thank you.
I might have to come back to you. I don't think I've got all of those questions in order, but I will take a couple and then you can prompt me on the others. So most grants are means tested or are about, so they are based around, so in answer to that, yes. And I think that's also the case for the Green Homes grants, again, means tested. So, but often we're also applying for grants where people are in, they might be in fuel poverty or they're in debt, or, so actually we're thinking about, are there things that we can provide that can help them in, when they're in very challenging situations, to get them on an even plane so that they can think about the other things that they can do around, behaviour change and measures and all of that stuff. So that's really important. Regarding engagement, we work very closely with the council on the engagement, and a lot of the engagement is done by the council, but we also do outreach to social prescribing link workers, or do community energy talks, or we do lunch and learn, attend lunch and learn sessions. We outreach to community settings as much as possible to make sure that we are engaging those people that will also bring in other referrals. So it is very much a kind of one to many. We want to make sure that everyone knows about the service so they can refer in those people that are in most need. Social prescribing link work is a new area of work to actually engage, because that's in a GP setting, and they'll see people that actually maybe some others that might go under the radar, but it's a kind of a good example. But very much it's a partnership approach, working with the council, and then looking at all of the kind of community hubs that we can connect to, and we do social media and all of that stuff. So we do, on the last slide you'll have our kind of social media, so we do try and promote all the work that we do, and also ask for other referrals. I don't know if there's anything else that you do, Joe, on that particular topic that you wanted to kind of mention around the engagement you do.
Just to say that we try and do articles in the magazine, around Ealing magazine, often, particularly just before winter, sort of the September-October issue. We try and get a nice case study in there to really flag up that the services are available ahead of winter. We also do a lot of like the network that we've built. So we offer like a fuel poverty training to all kinds of people in our network. So all the social service providers, other housing associations, and I think Groundwork actually leads on that training for us as well, with the National Energy Foundation. And so we provide training to other frontline staffers so that they're prepared with that information as well. They can be offering that advice and signposting to our service.
Yeah, that's really, yeah, absolutely. It's really important. We have somebody who specializes in outreach and training so that they can, you know, do that as their role. So it's kind of a targeted role that we find really important. And we also have the ability to bring in translators and where we need to ensure that we are really making sure that all of our kind of opportunities are promoted across the board. Sorry, I didn't quite catch the other part of your question.
One was that is there a charge for the consultation, and what is the success rate of the consultation?
Okay, so no, there's no charge. It's very much, you know, the whole point is that, you know, and I think that's really, it makes it really, you know, a trusted space and different. Sometimes we once did a poster and actually talked about how much energy savings, and we were providing that out to the community, and they actually like, oh, they just presumed that they were going to be paying for the service because they were going to make so much energy, you know, financial savings. So I think we kind of do. We have an app that presents the cost savings that and helps individuals visualize what costs they, you know, if they make a particular change, how much will that save them financially? Because financially is one of the motivators. It's not the only motivator, but it's obviously, particularly when you've got vulnerable residents or people that are on, you know, on low incomes, money is, you know, is definitely a motivator. So we try and present that. The ultimate is how successful that is very important as part of the work that we're doing with Ealing Now. We are looking at collecting data, you know, at 12 months, and so being able to look back to see actually how successful have our visits have our visits been. What we used to do was, you know, we do a visit and we would project the savings that you'd make. So project the CO2, project the financial savings, and give people an indication. But as you know, with everything, you know, it depends on how your behavior changes over that. You know, some of those are behavior change things, you know, turning your thermostat down 1 degree to save, you know, £35 across a year, or, you know, like all of those kind of things that you might need to do, but we need to check that people are still doing them. And if they're not still doing them, what else can we do? Do we need to do follow-up calls? Do we need to do some nudge things to actually encourage that to happen? So it's we have got some studies at the moment. We're trying to look at how do we make sure that we encourage people, because behavior changes for the longer term, and, you know, we don't like everything. We all have good intentions, but we don't always follow everything. So it's very much a watch this space. But the majority of visits are shown to be pretty successful in the data that we are getting back, but they're not perfect, and we always want to do more. This would be my answer.
Okay, thank you, Katrina. Is that okay, Councillor?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. And I had Councillor Martin again, I think. Is that right, Dee?
Yeah. I just wanted to ask quickly about water, which part of it makes the most water savings, if you know the answer to that? Is it behaviour, or is it changes to fittings and white goods and so forth? Which do you know which one would be the most beneficial?
Well, from a savings perspective, some of the biggest changes that you can make are, you know, simply things like turning your thermostat down is actually the temperature. From an energy perspective, they're the things that actually make a huge difference. We found, particularly with regarding water and leaks, working with Thames Water, a lot of the things that we found is that, you know, people have leaky toilets or leaky, you know, taps, and in schools that's costing an absolute fortune. I actually have got some stats, but it's, you know, the amounts of savings in a school setting just from taps not being fixed is huge. You know, and if you think if that was a hot tap that's not fixed, how much that's also, you know, yeah. So I think that is they're the kind of some of the simple things that can make such a huge difference. And you don't think that, you know, you might hear a drip in your cistern, I mean, actually not realize that that's actually, you know, you are losing water constantly. And so they are easy things to fit and to fix. The other things are, you know, simple things like, you know, we do a lot of changing. Sorry, I'm going to turn the light on. It's getting pretty dark. There you go. Sorry, you can see me now. Sorry. Probably dark in this room. Yeah, so, you know, things like we fit new shower heads, you know, simple things. You know, we encourage people to take shorter showers. I know that sounds like that. All the measures collectively make a huge amount of difference. But leakages are, you know, one of the easiest things, like to be able to fix leaks. I think that's what we found to be the most effective around water saving, particularly when you've got smart meters.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you. And then there was Councillor Chauhan as indicated.
I was just inspired by Dee's question about water, actually. I was just wondering whether, you know, whether there's this, in terms of working with Thames Water, when there are initiatives to install water meters and things, has there been any engagement of, like, around looking and doing kind of killing two birds with one stone, pardon the idiom, and just sort of checking taps and things at the same time? And you know, when these fittings are happening, is enough being made of the instant to work on the wider water saving issues too? And also, sorry to interrupt, just one further question is, I'm interested to see, like, to know what the sort of demographic breakdown is with people you work with. Like, do you have more interest from certain parts of the borough than others? I'm a councillor in Southall, and I'd be really interested to know, you know, how many people in Southall your organisation has worked with, and whether there's any thought about the different barriers that might be faced in engaging different communities around the issues of energy transitions and things like that, making your house more sustainable, etc.
Okay. So I suppose from Southall perspective, and I don't have the exact figures on our visits, but I did check, you know, whether our visits were kind of across the board, and they are, you know, they are pretty, you know, equally across the whole of across all of the boroughs. However, a long time ago, we did the Renew programme, and we did lots of targeted engagement, particularly in areas like Southall. It was many years ago. And, you know, what was most effective was, you know, working with phase settings and ensuring that we really kind of engaged to make sure that we had, you know, high uptake. And so that's one of the things that we've always done is try to maximise the uptake. I am actually happy to go back and try and find out some stats for you, if that would be helpful on the specifics, but I don't have them to hand. Apologies. And sorry, your first question.
Sorry, would you like me to repeat it?
Yeah, please. Sorry, I was breaking up a little bit.
Yeah, no problem. I was just wondering, you know, when you're working with Thames Water, whether there's, you know, when smart meters are being installed, whether there's an initiative to sort of then check leaky taps and things like that, whether there's work to sort of, you know, minimize minimise work in one visit, let's say.
So it's not in one visit. So they're installers, but then so we're engaged to provide customer engagement and also then smarter home visits. So there's two sides to our work. So we do the follow-up from a meter being installed, and that is a light touch. It's not as, it's very much water focused. It's not as in depth as a Green Doctor visit. That's an all-encompassing visit that covers everything that you'd need around kind of all of the things that you could do within the home environment. That it's a primary focus on water, and it's very primarily, you know, try to make your the maximized savings that you can, because obviously the water metering program is to reduce water consumption, and when that visit happens, they do look for leaks, so leaky roofs, leaky taps, all of that stuff. And then we have a plumbing service. We've got a plumbing service that we have now, and we've got a team of plumbers, and then we send them out, and then they go and help by fixing all of those amazing things. And they know much more about it than I do, but yeah, they do all of the interventions. And then as built on that, that's where, you know, we started to think about, actually, can we do this, and can we work within, you know, a business setting and a school setting, and that's kind of been an offshoot from that program. Is that helpful?
Can I just follow on for, like, Councillor Chauhan mentioned about working in different areas of the borough, different communities, because I'm just thinking about the Green Homes Grant, the local authority delivered scheme, because it's targeted at the least energy efficient homes, and there may be a link between income as well there as well, not having the money to invest and do the double glazing to have all the things done. And given that there's often a very much a significant income disparity east to west across the borough, where the east has got generally more affluence and the west has, you know, different economic, social, demographic scale. I mean, in terms of are we focusing and addressing this as part of where we're targeting these grants to go, or is it very much waiting for people to apply, and how they're connecting in with this? You know, so I'm just wondering how that is being managed or considered.
Yep. I'll have a go at that one. So we have there's a database where you lodge your energy performance certificates, and we've matched that database off against some benefits data that we have, and we've done letter drops, or I think direct mail, actually, not just letter drops, and the program. So that's all 7 boroughs that are involved in this initial thing. We've sent like about 100,000 letters out for the program so far. So it's gotten a good reach. I mean, that's, you know, we're talking about probably millions of homes. So it is just a small proportion, but so that has been we've been really trying to target our services or our resources in that instance to the people that we believe to be a fit for the criteria of the program. When we were just working on the Healthy Homes program in the past, when that was our primary sort of vehicle for helping with the affordable warmth aspect, we absolutely targeted the wards which are identified as areas with multiple indices of multiple deprivation. Is that a familiar term to people? So there's government data that suggests that, not just suggests that tell us that the concentration of deprivation in our wards, and we would often target those areas with either, we've done door knocking in the past, we've done ward forums, all sorts of materials to try and really get into those homes, because we know that they're probably the most vulnerable to fuel poverty. But we just, in the last year, we haven't done a lot of that door knocking, obviously, because it's been kind of a strange year. And because the service has changed just a bit by going to the more sort of telephone service and the overlay of the Green Homes Grant. So, but we could be assured that we will go back to that targeting of those wards that we know to be the high concentration of fuel poverty. And just as a side note, we know that from government data that we have about 14,000 homes in the borough that are vulnerable to fuel poverty. So that's kind of the target figure would be trying to help 14,000 homes. And overall, over the past decade that we've offered either Cozy or Healthy Homes, our affordable warmth program, we have managed to do, I think, just almost 4,000 home visits, so 3,829 home visits over the last decade. So not quite 14,000, but we're definitely making a good run at it.
Sure. No, it's interesting to think about the different indicators of, and that they're being used to actually target and consider where we're having interventions, which is good to hear. I mean, I'm conscious of the time now, it's about 8:30. So just for councillors who want to contribute or add any more questions, then please, if they can come forward sooner, that would be great. And thank you for those that have contributed already, just to flag that up. I've got Councillor Buttersill, who's just indicated, and Councillor Churhan as well. So Councillor Buttersill, did I see your hand go up there just for a second? Yeah. Was I right?
No, Chair.
Oh, sorry, so my mistake. Councillor Churhan, were you going to come back there? Yeah.
Yeah, I just had one last question. I mean, a lot of this sort of inspections of homes and things like that obviously requires access to homes. So how are we thinking about progressing with this campaign of retrofitting and all the rest of it, like preparing homes to transition towards greener homes and healthier homes amidst a pandemic? And if this continues and we've got to continue social distancing, like, have we thought about mitigating measures, or how we're going to engage differently, or how do we encourage behavior change without actually going in and assessing homes or being able to enter homes, for instance? Sorry, that's changing direction, but
No, absolutely, yeah. Yeah. Joe or Katrina, yeah.
I can start if you like. So during as soon as we knew that there were going to be restrictions due to the pandemic, we actually changed very quickly within a few weeks the way that we deliver services. We obviously wanted to protect residents, and obviously the staff team had to make those changes. So we within a few weeks redeveloped and changed our service to an online service, which meant that we had electronic forms that we could fill in for our team, and then they were able to take phone calls. They were able to also look at bills visually over the phone and turn the whole service into a kind of phone-based service. Now that is definitely not the kind of ultimate decision around the future of the service, because it has its positives, because we wanted to not we didn't want to we wanted to provide an interim, but I think what it has meant is that for some people we've actually found that the engagement, when we're on a call, they're actually much more focused on the topic. And that sounds really strange, but if you're in someone's house, then you're in their environment. They're like, they're showing you things in their house, but actually they're not getting diverted at all. And actually we found that when you're talking about behavior change or the measures, or they actually are completely focused on you. So that's been one of the the interesting things around what we've been doing. So that the conversations have been really positive. We've then, from our perspective, we've actually changed the way we provide measures. So we haven't been able to go into homes, but we have been able to drop off some measures. So if we're going to provide LED lights, we can, one of the Green Doctors will drop those off with some guidance on how they, need to safely install those lights or lamps. That's worked well. We've also changed some of the measures that we provided to make it easier for a DIY person to install them. So instead of tacking on items, we might have self-adhesive items, and we would then give guidance. So we've kind of gone a hybrid. So just on the Green Doctor service, we very quickly did not want to provide a service. We wanted to work within the context of where we are, and now we'll go back to looking at we're looking at our kind of a mixed plan of how we now transition into the new space of where we are. We do want to be in people's houses, but we want to do it safely when they feel confident for us to be doing that. And we're very much looking at the transition. That's solely on the kind of Green Doctor side, but it has meant that we've, as I mentioned earlier, we've already, this year delivered, over 300 of the kind of interventions with individuals, so which has been really positive.
Thanks, Katrina. Thanks.
We've been really happy with the way that groundwork has reshaped that service to deal with the extreme circumstances that they've felt this year. So that's that has been a really positive outcome. And I would say that in terms of the retrofitting and the experience that we're getting from the Green Homes Grant is that the construction industry has been deemed essential, and so construction can continue to go on if the home occupier is comfortable with having those people in their homes. And of course, throughout all of our contracts, we have, you know, COVID safe like policies for how they work in homes and making sure that we're keeping everyone safe. I think that Everwarm actually do a daily test of their operatives to make sure that they're, you know, not contributing to the spread of the virus. So yeah, that was a big important criteria of the contract that we awarded as well. And so we have been able to go on. I mean, I would say that we're having a good take up of the Green Homes Grant, but I would say it would definitely be even better, obviously, if we weren't dealing with the landscape of a pandemic that we are. But I think with vaccines rolling out so quickly that we'll hopefully see more and more confidence of people working in homes.
Thanks. I can't see any other indications of questions and things. But I just wanted to just double check, unless anybody's going to pitch in quickly from the councillor's side. Going forward with the Green Homes Grant, I mean, there's the Green Homes Local Authority Delivery Scheme, and then there was just the Green Homes Grant, so which is not local authority, and that was abolished at very short notice by the government. It was supposed to run for another year, and then it was extended till 2022, and then it was in the budget just recently gone, just given a few weeks notice, and has now disappeared. And the Green Homes Grant Local Authority Scheme, we've got sort of deadlines coming up in June. We've got other deadlines coming up, you know, before the end of this year. I'm just wondering, how are we, even if we are able to plan, is it every 6 months we're planning at, or is there any indication about what the next year holds or the next few years holds? Because the task is huge. But doesn't seem to be that, well, there's a rolling program for the next 2 years, 5 years. How are we dealing with that? Is it dealable with, or is it just on what we know now and that's what we're dealing with in a very pragmatic level? It's just understanding how that's been thought about.
Yeah, we're just being as malleable as possible with how we support what comes through. I mean, that is the big message that that not just myself, but, you know, lots of people in this area are trying to hammer in, is that we need consistency from a national policy. Like, we just need consistency, and we need resourcing to be able to accomplish this task. So far, there's a huge void in that, in terms of leadership. So, you know, there are some programs. So there's indications that there will be a third phase of the local authority delivery scheme for Green Homes Grant. There's no detail on that yet. There's no sort of timescales attached to that. So we're just in a bit of a wait and see mode again. But, you know, we're pretty fortunate in Ealing because we have an officer in my team who's dedicated to domestic energy. And so that's sort of the exception. A lot of those posts have gone away, but so she can really focus in and make herself available to make sure that we're extracting all the value we can from any schemes that come through. But we're also talking, like, on a London level and a West London level, of if there's anything that we can do to fill this gap and not be so dependent on the, you know, so the wavering support or lack of support that we're seeing from central government, and whether that could take the shape of, you know, private investment in this space to help us offer a consistent, you know, something around retrofitting, because, like I said, it's enormous, and we're going to be in this for the long run. So we really need that consistency and reliability. So yeah, until then, we just continue to roll with it.
Sure. Yes. Thank you very much, Joe, and thank you very much, Katrina. I don't see any other indications for hands up or any comments in the chat. So thank you very much for your contributions tonight, and Katrina, thank you very much for coming in and to Ealing and for all the work that the Green Doctors and ground workers done, because it does seem that it's really touching people who need that there. So I even see emojis of clapping, hand claps as well.
Yeah, that's really, thank you so much for inviting us. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you. So Katrina, we're now going to discuss some of the recommendations. You don't have to hang around in the meeting here and now. You're not obligated to do that.
Okay, I might step away because I have a young son and I'm just going to go and see him before bed. But thank you so much for inviting me.
Thank you for all your contributions. Very much appreciated. Thank you very much. So, and can I thank everybody for their contributions and questions? And I think it's the scale of energy efficiency alone is just monumental, and it's catching up on decades of not doing it the right way, because that's how things were done, and now we're really having to rethink how we're going to tackle the emergency and make it sure it's tackled in a very prompt way, and the scale is monumental. If we go to the recommendations, I don't know if there's any other comments. If any, I just want to give people any comments before we move on, and a chance if anybody wants to indicate in the hands up or the chat, just so I'm not skipping straight ahead. I can't see any indications. So just to move on to the recommendations, we can think of recommendations about this evening's discussions. Obviously, we've had a lot of information and a lot of other factors that have come in. So that's obviously quite a challenging thing to come up with recommendations on the hoof here and now. I'm more than happy to have people think about comments and to email them in, and I can sit down with the Vice Chair and officers and then come up with a list as well. We do have on the agenda pack the proposed recommendations. So they are proposals that they absolutely are for change or for deletion, amendments. So please bear that in mind. And the proposed recommendations are on page 67 of 72 in the agenda pack. I mean, it might be just an idea just for structure, just to go through those one by one, and then if there's any others to add on for this evening's discussion, then we can take those on board. So if I go through them one by one and call out each recommendation, then if we've got any comments, we can have a very sort of swift discussion about them. So proposal 1 is recommendation 1. It's on page 67 of 72. So the council should ensure that Ealing local plan has a key role in supporting the Ealing climate and ecological emergency strategy, so that it reflects and supports the council's aims regarding energy, and it talks about requiring a carbon offset for embedded carbon. And that's the first thing. Then B is about nature preserving existing green space and allotments. Just after this evening's discussion and further information about the carbon offset, that seems very much in hand. So from what we've heard tonight, the GLA set a figure and work is ongoing to assess how we can make that a more meaningful figure, so any contribution that's paid in terms of an offsetting levy can actually be used and is a meaningful fund. So that seems to be in hand. So I don't know if there's a need for that recommendation. So I'm thinking of fewer and better rather than just more recommendations. So if there's any indications in the chat, just that recommendation 1A seems okay. So Councillor Martin.
Yes, I was only wondering if what we were talking about, which was the percentage at which you would cap that. So when we have new builds, could we put in to say that we only allow that offset if they've met 80% of the zero carbon target, for example?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Which you might not have in our plan at the moment, but it's something we might want to think about.
Yeah. I mean, I don't have the technical knowledge to go through and understand that, but we can have something to ask for a review of how we apply that. So, I mean, from Joe's contribution, there seems to be a move that if you are, the more work you do, there could be a scale approach, which seems to be like giving an incentive.
Yeah. So our goal is 100%. So the offset or the levy is really to compensate for that. So much as it's great to make that a higher fee, it does involve work for us, etc., to make those savings elsewhere. So if we can push that as much as we can onto the developers, then I think that should be encouraged. I might not be the perfect person to decide what that percentage should be, but perhaps we should suggest that goes into our local plan. So and that's considered to cap it at some stage that says, well, only at say something like 80% can you above that pay a levy, but you must reach at least 80% of that 100% carbon zero target.
Right. So it's I wouldn't like to pin down specific percentages in the recommendation, just in terms of
example. Yeah, just as an example, because I don't know what the best figures should be either.
So, but I absolutely appreciate what we're driving towards. So if you wouldn't mind, if in terms of, I'll have a discussion with officers in terms of, is it going to be stepped? Is there a percentage to understand what's the best way of applying this to make it useful and practical? So
just in the spirit of that, whatever the best thing is.
Percentage levy. So we need to refine that just to make it a bit more particular to what we've heard tonight in terms of, so we're reflecting where it's going and driving forward. And the part B about preserving green allotments and spaces, so I propose just to keep that in there, because I think that's broadly in keeping with where we're heading. And I think there is a move in that in both the London plan and our plan should reflect that. So going to recommendation 2, the council should ensure that the divestment of pension funds from fossil fuel investment has a target date to reflect its zero carbon, which seems to me to be consistent with our goal. We shouldn't have carbon-based investments or heavy investments where we're seeking to be carbon neutral. We should, the common term is having a tilt against or away from carbon-based investments. So if we can have that, and I see Councillor Chohan has got, you raised your hands, Councillor Chohan.
I just wonder whether it would be possible to ask for more transparency in the timeline as well to progress of the progression towards decarbonisation. So alongside having published final dates, that we get step by step of what that process is.
Transparency in timeline. Maybe we won't spend time going through the finite of the wording, but I think that seems eminently reasonable. Transparency in timeline or staging points, or however we term it, but to see that when not just tilting, but I can see material changes. So that's I think that's reasonable. Taking that there. And 3, the council should ensure that a workplace parking levy supports alternative, more carbon efficient modes of travel that are accessible to a workforce. So I think that's to make sure that any work, and I don't think Ealing has a plan for workplace levies. This is done in Hounslow at present and in other places. But if we were to move on this point, it should be seen as a tangible contribution to transport and make it realistic there. And that was from our discussions that we had at the first meeting. So I think it's probably setting things up for the future rather than where we're going now, because I don't think there's a discussion in the council about a workplace parking levy, but it's to make sure that we're tilting it towards promoting better transport or active transport or less carbon or fossil fuel based transport. Any comments on that? Okay. I don't see any indications. Oh, and I've got a comment from Joe. Including carbon offset pricing in the recommendations might show a strong support for swift movement and highlight it to cabinet. And the carbon offset pricing in relation to which parts, just so I can check, Joe, you might have to dip back in here.
It was just from the first recommendation on
Oh, right.
offset fund. Sorry, that comes.
Oh, right. Okay. Sorry, I didn't see the chat at the same time as the discussion. So
it was just support of keeping that recommendation in, even though we do seem to have some traction on that. It could be helpful to highlight it to cabinet that this panel sees it as a priority to make sure that we get that job done. Basically.
Right. I think I might come back to you when I get the phrasing of the recommendation together, just to make sure I get all the technicalities right. But I've made a note there about recommendation 1. Thank you very much for coming in there, and apologies I didn't see the comment at the same time. So the council recommendation 4, the council should demonstrate engagement by doing and showing examples of those who have taken steps to address climate change and move towards zero emissions as a key theme to motivating involvement in the future climate work, which I think has been done. And we've got the work on I call it the trees estate, because most of the trees, the streets are called after trees, or it's the Park Village estate where the Engisprung work is being done. And I think around Ealing shows that, but I think we're looking for such a change in mindset and appreciation that the more examples and real life experience that can be shown, the better, I think. And it's not that we're not saying that hasn't been done already, but I think it really needs to be at the forefront, that people see it's a real opportunity that other people have done and they can take that. So I don't know if I've got any comments there. Thank you. And number 5, the council should ensure that online and print media, as well as other forms of engagement, are used to proactively engage community and inspire positive climate change action. I think that's what I think we need to get is more regular messaging going out, and not just always set pieces in around Ealing as a magazine, but just lots of small nuggets of information that feeds into people's consciousness. And Councillor Chauhan, he was indicating here.
Yeah, I don't know how possible this is, but like, what if we were to host some sort of expo where we bring together sort of, you know, like have tables whenever it's possible to do this in person, where, you know, it could be somewhere in the centre of Ealing, maybe the shopping centre, where we have, you know, groundwork and all the other sort of community groups that are working on transitioning homes, private homes as well, and to raise awareness. So, I mean, maybe we could do some engagement work around that. Like, I think could be really interesting to have sort of small tables and the chance to hotspot and ask people questions potentially. But I don't know whether that's something that can go in the recommendation or. Yeah,
no, I think there's like various events that take place and are organised for careers and apprenticeships. But I often think, when I'm trying to look at changing a heating system and looking at insulation and what's a vapor membrane and what does that mean, and there's so many issues that are often very new, that having that opportunity and that we can encourage exhibitions, small or large scale or however it's done, to have that so people have a chance to talk to people face to face who are in the know. Absolutely, I think that should be something that's taken on board. I'm quite aware of officers' time in terms of organising events, but they don't have to be big grand scale events. They could be some smaller events, but having that engagement work would be beneficial, I think, just to get knowledge out there and people to understand how we're changing to a lot of new systems. So yes, thank you. Recommendation 6, we've got council should ensure that that the community mapping of the current work being undertaken to the borough, which contributes to lower carbon and ecology improvements, records potential sites for new allotments and food growing, sources of startup incubator funding, local sources of food production for businesses, learning and volunteering opportunities that can encourage engagement with allotments and funding. I think that was a lot of in our first meeting, we heard about a lot of mapping in terms of recording what's going on in the borough at the moment needs to be done, so we're understanding where we are. So that works in hand for the most part, I think. But I think if we're endorsing that, we need to make sure that that gets done, and we've got value in doing that. I don't know if I have any comments there. No, is that okay? The council should assess areas of food poverty through available demographic information and details from the Ealing Food Bank Ealing Together project to inform where targets resources should be to support food initiatives. It was interesting to hear Joe talk about how they're overlapping the EPC certificates and demographic details and prioritising. So it's probably asking for something similar for our food priorities as well, to maybe we just tidy up some of that expression there, but making sure that we're actually trying to promote the promotion work in the areas where of the borough where we've got that either poverty or challenges for access. So I think that complements what's being done already, but just to make sure that we're actually linking all that information together. Any other comments on that? I'm aware I'm doing this quite at speed because it's 9 o'clock now, but please do flag up if there's any comments coming in. And the council recommendation 8, the council should make representations to the Secretary of State for the Department for Work and Pensions to alleviate food poverty by maintaining the uplifting universal credit payment. I think we should be lobbying with other authorities to make sure that, for a whole host of reasons, universal credit needs to be reviewed and worked on. I don't know if there's any comments there from Councillor Chohan. I just see an indication there, but I think we, as an authority, and in terms of our political role as representing the borough, that we need to step forward and make sure that we are voicing where we need to do and liaising with the LGA and which other groups that we can lobby through. So that's, I think, important to do. The council's community involvement, and further citizenship review panels should ensure that the panels represent the borough's ethnic and socio-economic profile and the 7 major towns of the borough. So it's just to make sure that we are going to go out for citizens review panels again, I think, with other projects. So to be really cognizant that to have that representation across borough. So, and I think the first meeting highlighted a sort of network of various religious, community and other organisations, so that we're actually tapping in and making sure we've got that representation into any future panel works. So it's representative of the borough in all its diversity from east to west, from different demographic groups as well. Is that okay? Just looking for any comments there. Recommendation 10, the council should take the community to explore the community's I'll start again. The council should take the opportunity to explore and support community cooperative enterprise exemplified in the Greenwich model as part of the Ealing Climate and Ecological Emergency Strategy. So there was previously a scrutiny on cooperatives working. So I think trying to say that what that recommended and what we should be doing here in the future is trying to embed something. And I think there's a link between and synergy between the demographic profiles we're looking at and where we're going to focus some work and maybe setting some priorities there. So any comments on this? I'm not seeing any comments there. Thank you. The council should ensure that the school catering contract requires that ingredients are sourced from local suppliers and organic suppliers where possible. So, Joe, you may be able to help us out here. Is there an option here to have some negotiation of the contract in terms of suppliers? So is that realistic to have in there? I just wanted to know that there is an option to come back to school catering contract and say, we want suppliers to think about this.
So as I understand it, the contract was awarded just over a year ago, I think in January or February of 2020, for the new food supplier for the catering contract. I think that because of the year that we've had, that was delayed, the implementation was delayed and will happen this summer. And as I understand it from the person that was in charge of the procurement for that activity, that there are sort of ways that we can progress their targets over time. So I think it could be helpful. It's sort of too late to get it sort of enshrined in the contract now, but important that that the officers understand that they have support to do that in the future.
It'd be interesting, maybe I need to explore a bit with this procurement officer about, is there a chance, even if the recommendation is that they should be moving over time, to acknowledge that they're in a contract now, but we need to be moving in a direction. Maybe I need to check that with the procurement officer to see what options are there to make sure that the recommendation is, it's aspirational, but it can be applied. So maybe we need to just double check that with the procurement officer there. But thanks for adding that in. And recommendation 12, the council should encourage a greater understanding of the role of diet by signposting information to educational resources to support the environment and health dietary education in schools. So any comments on that? I don't envisage officers writing lesson plans, but as somebody who was in the teaching for decades, when I get an education pack that does have lesson plans and does have all the resources, it makes life so much easier, so it's more likely to be applied. So are we communicating that to our schools? Are we just giving them the signposts? And I know there's a whole host of organisations that do have education packs, but are we making them available? So it's looking that we can communicate that to our schools, because there is a citizenship, personal health and social education classes, and obviously the domestic science and food tech classes. So there is opportunities to go to putting there, and I think a lot of schools are doing work in here, but any resources that we can signpost to is always beneficial on time pressured teachers. So 13, the council should support a healthier diet and meet an aim for reduced meat consumption by ensuring that Ealing's local plan supplementary planning documents restrict the opening of food takeaways close to schools. I did look into the London plan for this because I thought there was a restriction in the London plan, but I couldn't find anything. But there was press coverage of something being proposed, but I couldn't find anything in the London plan. But I know some authorities have put a certain distance from schools in a special planning outline, and that would often apply to a supplementary planning document. That would often apply to certain types of businesses from an area. If there was too many, then they would try and exclude them or give an upper limit, and it wouldn't just be food, but they have authorities done some work in that. So that might need to just be double checked to see what the parameters are, but making sure that those healthier food options are within our planning outlines. And Councillor Mohan has put in off licenses. Yeah, I think some authorities, that came in the chat, some authorities have looked at off license, they've looked at betting shops. So they've looked at a type of a retail profile which they want to restrict or stop a concentration of in a certain area. So that could be reviewed there. And the council Any other comments on there to Councillor Mohans? Okay. 14, the council should promote education, training, apprenticeship in food production and cooking to complement the work of work on food production. So absolutely, I think there's a theme there that we heard tonight as well about energy efficiency in terms of retrofit academies. So there is a whole sort of green agenda, which isn't just about solar panels and the heating and energy side of green economy. There's like that food side of green economy as well. So anything that can support training. And I think this in Southall, there was an initiative that the Greenwich commented on in Southall. Southall Manor, I think, was developing
Manor House.
Manor House. There we go. Thank you, Howji. Yes, I was dredging it out from my memory. Southall Manor House was moving towards. So that was something that's on the agenda. I don't know how far that's got completed, but anything that we can move along there would be good. And 15, the council should review the opportunities for floating gardens using the canal network for further food growing space. I know the Canal and Rivers Trust, there's work going on there to develop the canal side and also some land around there. I don't know where their holding finishes, if it literally is the towpath where their interest finishes or other areas. And it was Councillor Chohan who brought this up. So I don't think it's within the council because we don't own the canals, but it's a Canal and River Trust that have that influence. But however, we can encourage anything that uses land use for food production or the waterways. I have seen this in Vietnam at once, growing huge tracts of food in waterways, but I don't know how we're thinking. Any Councillor Chohan, any comments about this? Because I think you brought it up originally there.
I don't really have any additional comments. I've sent you some articles.
Yes.
Of other cases in London where floating gardens have been used. So I think, yeah, there's a lot of work that the Canal and River Trust is trying to do around, say, the waterways in Southall in particular. And I think it would be interesting to start those conversations with them, especially talking about regeneration in the area, etc., about how we integrate these principles of sustainability, encouraging local food production, and sort of transitioning our local eating habits as well, within those discussions about regeneration of the waterways. So, so that doesn't help the recommendation. But
I mean, part of it is maybe the Canal and River Trust, maybe they do have land associated with the canals. So, whether that in terms of land use, I know I've walked along the canals in the Southall area and West Ealing area and seen land which has got an odd fallow appearance. I don't know whether it's parkland, I don't know whether it's canal land, but we were looking at mapping literally land that could be used for allotments and food use.
Yeah, exactly. So I guess maybe speaking with the parks team about that. I know the Glade Lane Park along in sort of Norwood Green in Southall is looking to get some work. Its work is underway there. So I just wonder whether our parks team working along the canalway as well is able to integrate these principles.
I mean, I think the floating garden is a great idea. It's probably the most aspirational thing we've got here. To see. I wouldn't say something like
dream big, Paul. What can I say?
Yes, because it's not going to make Ealing look like Venice, because Venice doesn't have growing gardens in its canals, but it would look different, and it's looking for that radical change in mindset and not being afraid to think of something new, which is all power to you. I agree. I mean, that was kind of a very rapid run through. I mean, we've done some tweaking and some comments, and I was rapidly making notes about there. But are there any recommendations that people don't think we should make from that list? Anything? And I'm not going to be offended if anybody says, well, actually, I think this has already been done or we shouldn't do it. I just want to give people that option. I'm not seeing any comments there. So I've gone through and made some notes and looked at like the refining recommendation 1 with the levy and the fossil fuel and pensions investments, and to make sure that we've got a timeline or clarity of how we're making the progress. The carbon offset with recommendations 1 as well. How we do the engagement in different ways and times. And I think it was Councillor Mohan who mentioned in a previous meeting about the use of language, of different community languages as well, should come in with our engagement. But I just want to check, is there any dissent on any of those recommendations, which is absolutely fine if people want to come through with that. I'm not seeing any indication there in the chat. I know we've just had the energy efficiency meeting this evening. I don't know if anybody's got any outlines, and I'm not expecting perfect wording here, but any outlines about any recommendations from this evening now that either we can take away and we can work on, or anything that can, any suggestions, any indications would be welcome. I'm not seeing any indications there. I mean, what struck me is trying to understand the future in like the energy sprung and the retrofitting. And I think that's probably outside the council's control, but it's for us to lobby to get some certainty in our planning, because it must be incredibly difficult with very short timeframes of a few months to complete work, and then to know what might be happening next year when it's only 9 months away when next year arrives, or less than that, 6 months away almost now. So I really do think that is an issue, but that's probably for central government, and only our role is to lobby to get some more certainty. And I don't think that point was made tonight in part of the answers. And I think where we are now in terms of the energy efficiency, there's a lot of really positive work going on there and a lot of adventurous work. And it's about the scale and speed of that, but that's linked to funding and our capacity as an organisation. But I think there's a massive amounts of positive work tonight. I just want to make sure if they're giving anybody opportunities to make any thoughts or comments now. But if the meeting is okay, if the members are okay, then I suggest that myself and the Vice Chair and officers then come up, have a review about some, and we can circulate some recommendations for comments via email. I think a lot of this is in hand, and it's the challenge of getting funding to scale it up, and officers resourcing as well to make sure we can scale it up there, because that challenge is huge. But I think we've got a really good start and lots of enterprising things going on here. By nobody objecting, I'll just take it that we'll take this away, and if we've got any recommendations, we'll be able to take them forward and circulate by email. And I think there's a delegation of authority, am I right, Haji, in terms of taking this forward to finalise, or does it get delegated goes through to OSC? I just want to clarify the procedural aspect now.
Yes, so the panel agrees that the chair and vice chair and the officers work together to finalize the draft report, and it will go to the OSC most likely around early July, and thereafter to cabinet in the autumn. Right.
So if panel members are okay with that, so the delegation is to chair, vice chair to get the final report. Because there's a draft of that in the papers for this evening. Before we close the meeting, but if there's any comments on the draft report, because that's a summary of the previous 2 meetings, and then there'll be notes added to that. But I don't know if there's any comments. And the report largely is drawn from the minutes and the notes from the meeting. So I don't know if there's any comments on that report. There may not be. I know I've gone through it with Harjeet, and Councillor Buttersill was given an opportunity to offer some comments as well. Any comments on that draft report that we have at present? There may not be. I'm not seeing any indications. From this meeting, we'll tidy up the recommendations that we have and take the comments that we've had on board. The final report will have the records of this meeting added to it, and I'll write it forward. And then Harjeet has just outlined that it will go to OSC, then to Cabinet, and the process there. So I think that then concludes everything. There's no other things, there's no other work programme to go through, is there? Because this is the final meeting, Harjeet, is that right? So,
it is, yes.
Yeah. So on that note, it's really odd ending a meeting just looking at a screen and a list of names. But I'd like to thank Jo for all the work she's done during this this year, and all the time and effort, because we've met Jo multiple times. And I really appreciate, like, this is not just Jo's work, there's a massive team, maybe not a massive team directly immediately behind Jo, but across the whole breadth of the council, there's a huge number of our council officers chipping into this, whether it's in planning, whether it's in community work, whether it's in communications, whether it's in the whole rest of different departments. There's a whole investment there of different officers, so that's great to hear. Jo is often fronting this, but thank you to all the time and efforts you put into doing the reports and making them so clear and concise from what is a very extensive piece of work. So thank you for all that. It's very much appreciated. So thank you, Jo. And can I thank Harjeet as well for supporting us during this year and really doing some really extensive minutes and records of the meeting. So we've got a really comprehensive record of what's gone through here. And this isn't the end. I think that the proposal then for do another climate change, because we've scrutiny for next year. I don't know whether I'll be sharing it. I don't know who, but that's got to be decided. But it's clearly a massive role for the council. And I was only speaking with somebody earlier on this week, and they were just really impressed with what Ealing's ambition is and what Ealing's actually starting to do. So it's really good to hear that when you're speaking to people out there in the world, that message is starting to come through. But I think it's really up for all of us to make sure that people understand there's a real drive and some dramatic stuff that's happening in Ealing, and lots of stuff to be really proud about. So that's really good to see. So can I thank Jo, thank Harjeet, and can I thank all the panel for your contributions and for all the comments that have come in tonight, and thank you very much for all of that. So,
and thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Dee. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Chair. We really enjoyed this panel.
Thank you.
Yes, yeah. So have I. So have I. It's been lots of good stuff. So on that note, it is now 9:22. Thank you for the last couple of hours, and thank you for all the comments that have been had, and all the contributions during this meeting and previous ones. So thank you, everybody. Until we meet again next civic year, whenever that might be. So thank you very much. So on that note, I'll end the meeting, Harjeet. All right.
Thank you, Chair.
Right.